Why did one innocent text from our gorgeous neighbor end with my wife sobbing on the curb while movers carried out her things? What would you do if she wrote, "Not my business, but a tall, muscular guy just came to your wife while you were miles away"? How could my simple reply, "I'm out of town, can you help?" turn into the most unexpected alliance of my life? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Dan Parker, and I'm the kind of guy who can troubleshoot a crashed server in 15 minutes, but can't figure out why my marriage is circling the drain like yesterday's coffee grounds. At 40, I've got the kind of face that screams reliable IT support, which is exactly what I am. And apparently the kind of personality that screams boring husband to my wife Julia. "Dan, the garbage disposal is making that noise again," Julia called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that special tone of disappointment she'd perfected over our 12 years of marriage. It was the same tone she used when talking about my receding hairline or my inability to remember to put the toilet seat down. I looked up from my laptop, where I was remotely fixing some executive's email problem. "What kind of noise?" "You know, that grinding awful noise, like it's dying." I knew the noise. I'd been hearing it for 3 weeks, along with Julia's increasingly pointed comments about how some husbands actually knew how to use tools. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could diagnose network failures across 3 time zones, but a simple kitchen appliance had me stumped. "I'll call someone tomorrow," I said, which was code for, "I'll add it to the growing list of things I should probably learn how to fix, but won't." Julia appeared in the doorway of my home office, her real estate blazer perfectly pressed despite it being 7 in the evening. At 37, she still looked like the ambitious woman I'd married, all sharp angles and determined energy. Lately, though, that energy seemed focused on cataloging my inadequacies. "You always say you'll call someone. Meanwhile, I'm living with a kitchen that sounds like a construction site." She crossed her arms. "Kim's husband installed an entire bathroom last weekend, by himself." Kim was Julia's best friend, and apparently married to a combination of Bob Vila and Superman. I'd heard about Kim's husband's various home improvement victories roughly 1,000 times. "Good for Kim's husband," I said, not looking up from my screen. "Maybe he can come fix our disposal when he's done building his wife a new deck." "Actually," Julia said, and something in her voice made me glance up. She had that look, the one that meant she'd already made a decision and was just informing me about it. "Kim recommended this handyman, Marcus Bell. She says he's amazing, really knows his way around a house." The way she said amazing made my stomach do something unpleasant. It was the same tone she'd once used to describe me, back when I was still amazing instead of just adequate. "Fine," I said. "Call him." "I already did. He's coming Thursday." Of course she had. Julia didn't wait for permission anymore, hadn't for years. She just made decisions and informed me later, like I was a tenant instead of a husband. Thursday came with the kind of humid Florida heat that makes you question why anyone ever left air conditioning. I was on a conference call with a client in Seattle when I heard the knock at the front door. Through my office window, I could see Julia practically sprint to answer it. The man at our door was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average, muscular where I was soft around the middle, confident where I was perpetually apologetic. Marcus Bell looked like he'd stepped out of a home improvement commercial, tool belt slung low on his hips, work shirt that somehow managed to look both professional and rugged. "You must be Marcus," Julia said, and I could hear the smile in her voice even from my office. "I'm Julia. Thank you so much for coming." "Happy to help, Mrs. Parker. Kim spoke very highly of you." His voice was smooth, the kind of voice that probably made women forget they were married. I watched through the window as Julia led him toward the kitchen, her hand briefly touching his arm as she pointed out various household disasters. My conference call droned on about server migrations and security protocols, but I found myself distracted by the sounds coming from the kitchen. Julia's laugh, higher and more musical than it had been in months, the clanking of tools, Marcus's voice, confident and reassuring. "So this disposal's been giving you trouble?" I heard him say. "Oh yes, it's been making the most awful noise. My husband was going to fix it, but—" She trailed off in a way that somehow conveyed my complete inadequacy without actually finishing the sentence. "Well, let's see what we can do about that." 20 minutes later, the grinding noise was gone, replaced by the smooth hum of a properly functioning garbage disposal. I heard Julia clap her hands together like Marcus had just performed surgery. "You're a miracle worker. How much do I owe you? For something this simple? Don't worry about it. Consider it a favor for a friend of Kim's." A favor? Right. In my experience, when handsome strangers did favors for married women, they usually expected something in return. But maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe Marcus Bell was exactly what he appeared to be, a helpful handyman with no ulterior motives. That fantasy lasted exactly 3 days. Marcus fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, Julia announced over dinner Friday night. I didn't even ask him to. He just noticed it when he was leaving and offered to take a look. When he was leaving? I set down my fork. I thought he finished the disposal on Thursday. Well, yes, but then I remembered the bathroom faucet, and the loose tile in the hallway, and that wobbly ceiling fan in the bedroom. Julia's cheeks were slightly flushed. He's just so thorough. Thorough. Another word that had once described me, back when Julia appreciated thoroughness. Now, apparently, she got her thoroughness elsewhere. "How much is all this thoroughness costing us?" I asked. "He's very reasonable. And Dan, he actually knows what he's doing. Do you know he installed the entire kitchen in the Morrisons' new house? By himself?" The Morrisons' new house was a showpiece that Julia had sold last year. I'd heard her rave about the kitchen roughly 50 times, never knowing that Marcus Bell was responsible for it. "Sounds like quite a guy," I said. "He is." Julia's voice had that dreamy quality again. "He's coming back Monday to look at the deck railing. Some of the boards are loose." Monday turned into Wednesday, which turned into Friday. Marcus Bell became a regular fixture at our house, always finding something else that needed his attention. The man had an uncanny ability to discover problems I'd never noticed, and an even more uncanny ability to solve them, while Julia watched with obvious admiration. I started working from home more often, telling myself it was just to keep an eye on things. But every time I saw Julia and Marcus together, I felt something cold and ugly settling in my stomach. The way she laughed at his jokes, the way she brought him iced tea without being asked, the way she found excuses to stand close to him while he worked. "You're being ridiculous," I told myself. "She's just grateful for the help." But then I met Elle Martinez. Elle lived 2 houses down, a sharp-tongued woman in her late 30s who'd recently gone through a messy divorce. She had the kind of dark eyes that missed nothing, and the kind of direct manner that made small talk impossible. I was checking the mailbox when she approached, her own mail tucked under her arm. "So," she said without preamble, "how long has your wife been screwing the handyman?" I nearly dropped my electric bill. "Excuse me?" "Marcus Bell, tall, good-looking, drives the blue Ford pickup. He's been at your place every day this week." Elle's expression was matter-of-fact, like she was commenting on the weather. "Yesterday, I saw them in your backyard. He had his shirt off, and your wife was practically drooling." My mouth felt dry. "He's been doing work around the house." "I'm sure he has." Ella's smile was sharp. "Look, it's none of my business what your wife does with her free time. But if I were you, I'd want to know that half the neighborhood is talking about it." She walked away, leaving me standing there with a handful of bills and the uncomfortable certainty that my marriage was about to become the subject of neighborhood gossip. That evening, I watched Julia more carefully. The way she checked her phone constantly, the way she hummed while doing dishes, the way she'd started wearing perfume to the grocery store. "Marcus is coming tomorrow to finish the deck," she said, not looking up from her phone. "He thinks it might take most of the day." "Most of the day for deck railing?" "Well, he wants to check the whole structure, make sure it's safe." Julia finally looked at me, her expression challenging. "Is that a problem?" It was a problem, a big one, but I wasn't sure how to articulate that without sounding like a paranoid husband. "No problem," I said. "I'll be working anyway." But I wouldn't be working. I'd be watching and planning, because if Marcus Bell thought he could waltz into my house and steal my wife, he was about to learn that even boring IT guys have their limits. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of oppressive humidity that makes your clothes stick to your skin before you've even stepped outside. I was supposedly leaving for a client emergency in Tampa, a convenient lie that would give me the perfect opportunity to see what Julia and Marcus got up to when they thought I wasn't around. "I should be back by evening," I told Julia, who was already dressed in a sundress that showed more skin than her usual Saturday attire. "Call if you need anything." "I'm sure Marcus and I can handle whatever comes up," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I bet they could. I drove around the block and parked 3 streets over, then walked back through the neighborhood's winding paths to Elle's house. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized t-shirt, a cup of coffee in her hand. "Well, well," she said, looking me up and down. "The husband returns. Let me guess. You want to know what your wife's really up to with Mr. Fix-It?" "Something like that." Elle stepped aside to let me in. Her house was the opposite of mine. All clean lines and modern furniture, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a magazine. No family photos cluttering the surfaces, no accumulated debris of a long marriage. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." She poured me a cup and gestured toward her kitchen window, which had a perfect view of my backyard. "Prime real estate for surveillance. I've been getting quite the show this week." As if on cue, Marcus's blue Ford pickup pulled into my driveway. I watched him get out, tool belt already in place, and walk to the front door with the confidence of a man who belonged there. Julia opened the door before he could knock. Even from this distance, I could see the way she smiled at him, the way she touched his arm as she led him toward the backyard. They disappeared from view behind the house. "They'll be out on the deck in a few minutes," Elle said, settling into a chair beside me. "That's when it gets interesting." She was right. Within 10 minutes, Julia and Marcus appeared on our deck. He had his toolbox, but he seemed more interested in Julia than in any actual repairs. They stood close together as he pointed out various issues with the railing, his hand on her lower back. "Jesus," I muttered. "Oh, that's nothing," Elle said. "Yesterday she brought him a beer at 10 in the morning. They sat on those deck chairs for an hour, just talking and laughing. She kept playing with her hair. You know that thing women do when they're flirting." I knew the thing. Julia used to do it with me. As we watched, Marcus pulled his shirt off. The Florida sun had been generous to him. His chest and shoulders were tanned and muscled from years of physical labor. Julia handed him a bottle of water, her fingers lingering on his as she passed it over. "I need pictures," I said. Ella raised an eyebrow. "Planning something?" "Maybe, probably, I don't know yet." I felt like my brain was wrapped in cotton, unable to process what I was seeing. "I just need evidence." "Evidence for what? Divorce court?" I haven't thought that far ahead. Elle disappeared into another room and returned with a camera equipped with a telephoto lens. "Left over from my own marriage troubles," she explained. "My ex-husband thought he was being sneaky with his secretary. Turns out, sneaky doesn't work when your neighbor has professional photography equipment." She handed me the camera and showed me how to adjust the zoom. Through the lens, I could see Julia and Marcus in sharp detail. The way she laughed at something he said. The way he leaned closer when he talked to her. the way her hand rested on his bare shoulder. "Get the one where she's touching his chest," Elle said quietly. I clicked the shutter just as Julia placed her palm flat against Marcus's sternum, her head tilted up toward his face. Even through the camera lens, the intimacy was obvious. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Depends on what you mean by this. He's been coming around for 3 weeks, but the touching and flirting started about a week ago. The real question is how far it's gone." As if to answer her question, Marcus pulled Julia closer, his hands on her waist. She didn't pull away. Instead, she moved closer, her body pressed against his. I took another photo, then another. Each click of the shutter felt like a small act of violence against my marriage, but I couldn't stop. I needed to see how far they'd go, how brazen they'd become. "They're going inside," Elle observed. Sure enough, Julia was leading Marcus toward the sliding glass door that opened into our living room. They disappeared into the house, leaving the deck empty, except for Marcus's abandoned tools. "Now what?" I asked. "Now we wait, and document, and figure out what you're going to do about it." We waited for 2 hours. During that time, Elle made more coffee and I took notes in a small notebook I'd found in her kitchen drawer. Times, dates, observations. The methodical documentation helped calm my racing thoughts. Marcus and Julia finally reappeared on the deck at 12:30. Julia's hair was mussed, her sundress wrinkled. Marcus had put his shirt back on, but it was inside out. "Well," Elle said dryly, "I think we can safely say the deck wasn't the only thing getting nailed today." I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. It wasn't just anger, it was something more calculating. Julia had made her choice, and now I was going to make mine. "I need more," I said. "More what?" "More evidence, more information, more ammunition." Elle studied my face. "You're planning something." "Yeah, I am." Over the next week, Elle and I established a routine. I'd leave for work as usual, then circle back and park at her house. We'd document Marcus's visits, when he arrived, how long he stayed, what he and Julia did together. The pattern became clear quickly. Marcus came by every day around 10 in the morning, supposedly to work on various household projects. But the actual work seemed secondary to the flirtation, the touching, the long conversations over coffee and beer. On Wednesday, I watched them in our hot tub. Julia had bought a new bikini, red, tiny, nothing like the conservative one-piece she usually wore. Marcus had stripped down to swim trunks that left little to the imagination. They sat close together in the churning water, Julia's legs draped over his lap. "This is getting pornographic," Ella muttered, adjusting the camera lens. I took photos anyway. Each image was another nail in the coffin of my marriage, but also another piece of ammunition for whatever came next. On Thursday, I made a discovery that changed everything. I was going through our credit card statements, something I'd never bothered with before, trusting Julia to handle our finances. But now I was looking for evidence of her affair, and what I found was worse than I'd imagined. Julia hadn't just been sleeping with Marcus. She'd been paying him. The charges were all there, hidden among grocery receipts and gas station purchases. Cash advances, transfers to Marcus's business account, payments for home improvements that cost twice what they should have. I called the number on Marcus's business card, the one Julia had left stuck to our refrigerator. "Bell Home Services?" a recorded voice said. "We're currently busy helping other customers, but your call is important to us. Please leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as possible." I hung up and did some research. Marcus Bell wasn't just a handyman. He was a contractor with a business license and a website full of glowing reviews, most of them from women, most of them praising his personal attention and dedication to customer satisfaction. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Marcus wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was running a business built on seducing lonely housewives and overcharging them for unnecessary work. I was funding my own cuckolding. That evening, I confronted Julia about the charges. "These payments to Marcus," I said, spreading the credit card statements across our kitchen table. "They seem excessive for the work he's been doing." Julia's face went pale, then flushed red. "He's been doing a lot of work around the house. Quality costs money." $3,000 in 2 weeks? For what, exactly? The deck, the bathroom repairs, the kitchen work. She was scrambling, her voice getting higher. "You wouldn't understand. You don't know anything about home improvement." "I know enough to recognize when I'm being ripped off." Julia's expression shifted from defensive to angry. "Maybe if you could fix things yourself, I wouldn't need to hire someone else." "Fix things myself?" I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "Julia, I work 60 hours a week to pay for this house. I'm sorry I don't have time to become a master carpenter in my spare time." "Other husbands make time." "Other husbands, right, like Kim's husband and Tasha's husband and now Marcus Bell." I leaned forward. "Tell me, Julia, what exactly has Marcus been fixing around here, besides your apparent need for male attention?" The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Julia's mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, I thought she might confess, might break down and apologize and beg for forgiveness. Instead, she lifted her chin and looked me straight in the eye. "Marcus is a professional. He knows what he's doing." "I'm sure he does. If you have a problem with the work he's doing, take it up with him directly." "Maybe I will." Julia gathered up the credit card statements and stalked out of the kitchen. I heard her bedroom door slam. Our bedroom door, though it hadn't felt like ours in a long time. I sat alone at the kitchen table, listening to the perfect silence of our garbage disposal and thinking about revenge. My garage had always been Julia's least favorite part of our house. Too cluttered, too masculine, too much evidence of hobbies she didn't understand. But now it became my sanctuary, the place where I planned Marcus Bell's downfall. Ella found me there Saturday morning, hunched over my laptop with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "Planning world domination?" she asked, settling into the folding chair I'd set up for her visits. "Something like that." I turned the screen toward her. "Meet Marcus Bell, entrepreneur." I'd spent the night researching Marcus's business, cross-referencing his customer reviews with public records and social media profiles. The pattern was even worse than I'd suspected. "Look at this," I said, clicking through a series of photos on his business website. Every single testimonial is from a woman. Every single one mentions his personal touch and attention to detail. And look at these before and after photos. Ella leaned closer. "They all look like expensive work." "Exactly. Kitchen renovations, bathroom remodels, deck installations. This guy isn't just fixing leaky faucets, he's talking women into major home improvements, then overcharging them for the privilege. And sleeping with them in the process." "I think so. Look at this review from Linda Morrison. That's the kitchen Julia was raving about. Marcus transformed not just my kitchen, but my whole outlook on life. I can't recommend him highly enough." "What kind of contractor transforms your outlook on life?" Elle scrolled through more reviews. "This is either the best handyman in Florida or the most successful gigolo." My money's on gigolo. I pulled up another window, this one showing Marcus's social media profiles. His Instagram was full of shirtless work photos, carefully staged to show off his physique while he installed cabinets or laid tile. His Facebook page was a parade of grateful female customers, all gushing about his wonderful work. "The guy's running a one-man escort service disguised as a construction business," I said, and Julia fell for it completely. "So what's the plan?" I'd been thinking about that all night. The old Dan Parker would have confronted Marcus directly, maybe threatened to call the Better Business Bureau or leave bad reviews online. But the old Dan Parker had been a chump, the kind of guy whose wife cheated on him with the handyman. The new Dan Parker was going to be more creative. "I'm going to destroy him," I said. "Professionally, personally, completely." Ella raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "It's going to be beautiful." I spent the rest of the weekend putting my plan into motion. The first step was reconnaissance. I needed to know Marcus's schedule, his habits, his weaknesses. Ella helped with surveillance while I worked on the technical aspects. Marcus's business was surprisingly sophisticated for a one-man operation. He had a professional website, active social media accounts, and a customer management system that tracked appointments and billing. He also had terrible cybersecurity. It took me less than an hour to crack his email password, Hammer123, because apparently even successful gigolos weren't immune to basic password stupidity. Once I was in his system, I had access to everything: customer lists, appointment schedules, financial records, and most importantly, his personal communications. The emails were a gold mine. Marcus wasn't just sleeping with Julia. He was juggling at least 4 other customers in our neighborhood alone. Mrs. Patterson 3 blocks over, who'd hired him to remodel her bathroom. The divorced woman on Maple Street, who was paying him to build a deck. The widow on Pine Avenue, who'd contracted him for a full kitchen renovation. Each relationship followed the same pattern: initial contact for a small repair, escalating to major projects, intimate photos exchanged via email, and bills that would make a luxury hotel blush. "Jesus," Elle said, reading over my shoulder, "this guy's running a harem and charging premium rates for the privilege." I scrolled through Marcus's financial records. "Look at these invoices. He's billing these women 2, sometimes 3 times the normal rate for this kind of work. Because they're not just paying for construction." Exactly. The emails also revealed something else useful: Marcus's schedule for the next week. He had appointments lined up every day, including a big job at a house across town that would keep him busy all of Thursday. Thursday. Perfect. "What happens Thursday?" Elle asked. I smiled. "Thursday, Marcus Bell learns what happens when you mess with an IT professional." Tuesday morning, I called Marcus's number and left a message in a disguised voice, claiming to represent a wealthy client who needed extensive work done on a waterfront property. Big money, rush job, had to be Thursday. I gave him Elle's friend's address, a house that was currently empty while the owners were in Europe. Marcus called back within an hour, eager to discuss the project. I let it go to voicemail, then sent him a text with more details about the fictional job. Kitchen renovation, bathroom remodel, deck repair, exactly the kind of comprehensive project that would keep him busy all day. Wednesday night, I made my preparations. Marcus's beloved Ford F-150 was his pride and joy, a pristine blue pickup truck that he kept parked in our driveway like a territorial marker. I'd watched him wash and wax it every week, treating it with more care than most people showed their children. It was about to become significantly less pristine. I waited until 3 in the morning, then crept out to the truck with my supplies. The doors were unlocked. Apparently, Marcus trusted our neighborhood's security more than he should have. The first step was the shrimp. I'd bought 10 pounds of raw shrimp from the seafood market, along with a selection of other aromatic delicacies: sardines, anchovies, a container of fish sauce that smelled like low tide in hell. I distributed these treasures throughout the truck's interior, paying special attention to the air vents and the space under the seats. The Florida heat would do the rest. Next came the plastic wrap. I carefully covered the driver's seat with multiple layers of clear plastic, then added another layer of fish sauce for good measure. To the casual observer, the seat would look normal. To anyone who actually sat down, it would be a very different experience. Finally, I left my calling card, a note tucked under the windshield wiper. "Smells like success, Marcus." A satisfied customer. Thursday morning arrived with temperatures in the high 80s and humidity that felt like breathing through a wet towel. Perfect weather for accelerating the decomposition of seafood. I watched from Elle's kitchen window As Marcus emerged from our house at 9:30, Julia waving goodbye from the doorway like a loving wife sending her husband off to work. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus climbed into his truck without noticing anything amiss. He started the engine, rolled down the windows, and backed out of our driveway. He made it exactly 2 blocks before pulling over. Even from Elle's house, we could see him jumping out of the truck, frantically waving his hands in front of his face. He walked around the vehicle, clearly trying to figure out what was wrong, then reluctantly climbed back in. Phase 1 complete, I told Ella. What's Phase 2? Phase 2 is where things get interesting. Marcus spent the morning at the fake job site, probably wondering why no one was there to meet him. He called the number I'd given him, a burner phone I'd bought specifically for this purpose, but I didn't answer. Meanwhile, I was busy with Phase 2 of my plan. I'd created a new email account using Marcus's name and photo, then sent messages to his entire customer list. The emails were carefully crafted to look like they came from him, explaining that he was raising his rates significantly due to increased demand for premium services. The new rates were astronomical, triple his already inflated prices, with additional charges for personal consultations and extended service calls. I included a detailed price list that made his services sound more like a high-end escort operation than a construction business. The responses started coming in within hours. "Is this some kind of joke?" wrote Mrs. Patterson. "I'm canceling our contract immediately," said the woman on Maple Street. "I'm reporting you to the Better Business Bureau," threatened the widow on Pine Avenue. By noon, Marcus's phone was ringing constantly. I could see him in his truck, parked outside the empty house, frantically trying to answer calls and explain that he hadn't sent any emails about rate increases. But the damage was spreading faster than he could contain it. I'd also posted the same rate information to Marcus's social media accounts, along with some carefully selected photos from his personal files. Nothing explicit, but enough to make it clear what kind of services he was really providing. The comments section exploded. "So that's what I was really paying for," wrote one former customer. "I should have known no contractor was that attentive," added another. "My husband was right about you," posted a third. Marcus's professional reputation was crumbling in real time, and I had a front row seat to watch it happen. Around 2 o'clock, he gave up on the fake job and headed home. I watched him pull into our driveway, his truck windows still rolled down despite the heat. The smell had apparently gotten worse during his morning of crisis management. Julia came out to greet him, but stopped short when she got close to the truck. Even from Elle's house, I could see her wrinkle her nose and step back. Marcus climbed out of the cab, his face red with heat and frustration. He was gesticulating wildly, clearly trying to explain the morning's disasters to Julia. She listened with growing alarm, her hand over her nose. "I think it's time for Phase 3, I told Elle. "There's a Phase 3? "There's always a Phase 3. I walked home through the backyards, approaching my house from the rear. Marcus and Julia were still in the front driveway, their voices raised in argument. Perfect. I slipped through our back door and grabbed the garden hose, then filled a large bucket with water. To this, I added the remaining fish sauce, some liquid fertilizer, and a generous helping of the compost from Julia's neglected vegetable garden. The resulting mixture smelled like death warmed over. I carried the bucket to the front of the house, staying out of sight behind the garage. Marcus was still explaining his morning to Julia, his voice getting higher and more defensive with each word. "Someone's sabotaging me," he was saying. "They hacked my email. They put something in my truck. They're trying to destroy my business." "Who would do something like that?" Julia asked. "I don't know, but when I find out—" "You'll what?" I stepped around the corner of the garage, bucket in hand. Marcus and Julia turned toward me, their faces registering surprise and confusion. "You'll what, Marcus?" I repeated, walking closer. "What exactly will you do when you find out who's been sabotaging you?" Marcus straightened up, trying to look intimidating. "Dan, I didn't know you were home." I bet you didn't. I stopped about 10 feet away from them, close enough to see the sweat stains on Marcus's shirt and smell the lingering aroma of decomposing seafood. Having some car trouble? Someone put fish in my truck, Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. Someone broke into my truck and filled it with rotting fish. That's terrible, I said, not bothering to hide my smile. Who would do such a thing? I don't know, but maybe it was one of your satisfied customers, I interrupted. You know, someone who felt like they got exactly what they paid for. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Oh, I think you know exactly what it means. Julia was looking back and forth between us, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Dan, what's going on? Why don't you ask Marcus? I suggested. Ask him about his business model. Ask him about his customer service philosophy. Ask him about his premium rates for personal attention. Marcus took a step toward me. You need to back off, Dan. Or what? You'll overcharge me for home repairs? You'll seduce my wife and bill me for the privilege? Julia gasped. Dan! It's okay, Julia. I know all about Marcus's special services. I know about the emails, the photos, the inflated invoices. I know about Mrs. Patterson and the woman on Maple Street and the widow on Pine Avenue. I know everything. Marcus's face had gone pale. You're crazy. Am I? Then explain this. I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of his own email, one of the more explicit messages he'd sent to a customer. Marcus's eyes widened as he recognized his own words. How did you get access to your email? Marcus, your password was Hammer123. My 10-year-old nephew could have hacked your account. Julia was staring at Marcus now, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding to horror. Marcus, is this true? Julia, I can explain. Explain what? I asked. Explain how you've been running a prostitution ring disguised as a construction business? Explain how you've been scamming lonely housewives out of their money? Explain how you've been using my wife to get referrals to your other customers? It's not what? It's not true? Then explain these. I showed Julia some of the photos I'd taken, the ones showing her and Marcus in intimate positions on our deck, in our hot tub, in our house. Her face crumpled as she saw herself through my eyes, just another mark in Marcus's elaborate con game. Oh, God, she whispered. Marcus was backing toward his truck now, clearly realizing that the situation was beyond salvaging. Look, Dan, maybe we can work something out. Work something out? I hefted the bucket of foul-smelling water. You mean like a payment plan for the $3,000 you stole from me? Or maybe a refund for services not rendered? You're insane. Maybe, but I'm also done being the chump who pays for his own humiliation. I threw the contents of the bucket at Marcus, drenching him in the putrid mixture. He stumbled backward, slipping on the wet driveway and landing hard on his backside. The smell that rose from his soaked clothes was indescribable. That's for the garbage disposal, I said, and the faucet, and the deck railing, and my wife. Marcus struggled to his feet, water and worse dripping from his hair and clothes. You're going to pay for this, Dan. No, Marcus. I'm done paying for things. But you're just getting started. He climbed into his reeking truck and peeled out of our driveway, leaving skid marks on the asphalt and a lingering smell of fish and fertilizer. Julia and I stood in the sudden silence, not looking at each other. Dan, she said finally. Don't, I said. Just don't. I walked back into our house, leaving Julia standing alone in the driveway. Through the window, I could see neighbors starting to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Several of them had their phones out, recording the aftermath of Marcus's humiliation. By evening, the video would be all over social media. By tomorrow, everyone in the neighborhood would know exactly what Marcus Bell really was. But I wasn't done with him yet. Not even close. The video of Marcus's shrimp bath, as Elle dubbed it, Went viral on our neighborhood's Nextdoor app within 6 hours. By Sunday morning, it had been shared 47 times and generated over 200 comments, most of them expressing shock at Marcus's business practices and sympathy for his victims. "Holy crap, Dan," Elle said, scrolling through the comments on her phone. "You've created a monster. Listen to this one. I always wondered why Marcus charged so much for simple repairs. Now I know I was paying for more than just his carpentry skills." I was sitting in her kitchen again, watching my house through the window. Julia's car was still in the driveway, but she hadn't spoken to me since the confrontation with Marcus. She'd spent Saturday night in the guest room, and I'd heard her on the phone until well past midnight, probably doing damage control with her friends. "What about this one?" Ella continued. "My sister hired Marcus last year for a bathroom remodel. The work was good, but he kept finding excuses to come back and check on things. Now I understand why." Jesus, Dan, how many women was this guy working on? More than we thought, apparently. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I found a photo of Marcus's truck parked outside a car wash, surrounded by employees with pressure washers and industrial-strength cleaning equipment. The message read, "Third car wash today. Still smells like low tide. Well played." A neighbor. I showed the photo to Elle, who laughed so hard she nearly choked on her coffee. "The gift that keeps on giving," she said. "But what's your next move?" I'm not sure there needs to be a next move. Marcus's reputation is destroyed, his business is finished, and Julia knows exactly what kind of man she was sleeping with. You think that's enough? Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Julia's name. "Dan, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Come home." I found Julia in our living room, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair unwashed, and her makeup smeared. She looked like she'd been crying, but her expression was more angry than remorseful. "Sit down," she said. I remained standing. "What do you want to talk about?" "I want to talk about what you did to Marcus." "What I did to Marcus?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Julia, he was scamming you. He was scamming all of us." "That doesn't give you the right to destroy his life." "Destroy his life?" The man was running a prostitution ring out of his pickup truck. I just made sure people knew what they were really paying for. Julia stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "You humiliated me, Dan. You made me look like a fool in front of the entire neighborhood. You made yourself look like a fool. I just documented it. Those photos you took, the things you said in front of Marcus, that was cruel and vindictive and what? Accurate? True? Justified? It was revenge, pure and simple." I stared at my wife, this woman I'd been married to for 12 years, and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. The Julia I'd married would have been mortified by her behavior, would have apologized and begged for forgiveness. This Julia was angry at me for exposing her affair, not sorry for having it. "You're right," I said. "It was revenge. And you know what? It felt good." "You're sick." "I'm sick? Julia? You spent 3 weeks screwing another man in our house, in our bed, with our money, and I'm the sick one for calling you on it?" "I never meant for it to go that far." "But it did go that far, and then it went further, and you would have kept going if I hadn't stopped it." Julia's anger crumbled, replaced by something that might have been desperation. "Dan, please, can't we just forget this happened? Can't we try to work things out?" "Work things out? Julia, you cheated on me with a con artist who was using you to scam other women. There's nothing to work out." "It was a mistake, a stupid, terrible mistake, but it's over now." "You're right, it is over." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to her. "By the way, I've already talked to a lawyer. You'll be hearing from him soon." Julia's face went white. "Dan, wait." But I was already gone, walking back to Elle's house and the new life I was building without my cheating wife. Monday morning brought fresh developments. Marcus's business phone had been disconnected, His website was down, and his social media accounts had been deleted. According to the neighborhood gossip network, he'd been evicted from his apartment and his truck had been repossessed. Apparently, he was behind on everything, Ella reported, reading from her phone. Rent, truck payments, business insurance. The guy was living completely beyond his means. Probably spending all his money on maintaining his image, I said. Can't seduce wealthy housewives if you look like you're struggling financially. Well, he's definitely struggling now. My own phone had been ringing all morning with calls from Marcus's former customers, women who'd seen the video and wanted to share their own stories. The pattern was always the same: small repair jobs that escalated into major projects, flirtatious behavior that crossed professional boundaries, bills that seemed excessive but were justified by Marcus's charm and apparent expertise. "I feel so stupid," said Mrs. Patterson when I called her back. "He charged me $4,000 to remodel my bathroom, and I was grateful for his attention. I actually thought he was interested in me as a person." "You weren't stupid," I told her. "You were lonely, and he exploited that. There's a difference." "Are you going to press charges?" I'd been thinking about that. Marcus had definitely committed fraud, possibly extortion, and certainly had violated numerous business regulations. But criminal charges would mean police reports, court appearances, and months of legal proceedings that would keep him in my life longer than I wanted. "I don't think that's necessary," I said. "I think Marcus has learned his lesson." Tuesday proved me wrong. I was at Elle's house, working on my laptop while she did yoga in her living room, when we heard the sound of a truck pulling into my driveway. Through the window, we could see Marcus's blue Ford, still bearing the faint aroma of seafood despite multiple trips to the car wash. Marcus got out of the truck and walked to my front door with the swagger of a man who thought he still had some power left. He pounded on the door hard enough to rattle the windows. "Dan!" he shouted. "I know you're in there! We need to talk!" Julia opened the door, and even from Elle's house, we could hear their raised voices. "He's not here," Julia said. "Bullshit. His car's in the driveway." He took an Uber to work. "Julia, you need to talk to your husband. He's destroyed my life over nothing." "Over nothing?" Julia's voice was getting higher. "Marcus, you lied to me. You used me." "I never lied to you. I told you exactly what you wanted to hear. That's the same thing. Look, what Dan and I had was special. I wasn't using you. You were what? In love with me? Please. I've seen the emails, Marcus. I know about the other women." There was a long pause, then Marcus's voice, lower and more dangerous. "You think you're better than them? You think you're special? Julia, you were just another lonely housewife with a credit card and a husband who couldn't satisfy her." Even from across the street, I could hear Julia's sharp intake of breath. "Get off my property," she said. "Or what? You'll call your husband? The man who's too much of a coward to face me himself?" That was enough. I stood up and headed for the door, but Elle grabbed my arm. "Don't," she said. "That's exactly what he wants. He wants to provoke you into a confrontation so he can claim you're harassing him. I can't just let him—" "Yes, you can. Julia made her bed. Now she gets to lie in it." Ella was right, but it was hard to listen to Marcus verbally abuse my wife, even after everything she'd done. Through the window, I could see him leaning closer to Julia, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You owe me, Julia. I did work on your house. Good work. And your psycho husband destroyed my reputation before you could pay me. I don't owe you anything. $3,000. That's what you owe me." "For what? For lying to me? For using me to get to other customers?" "For services rendered." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Julia must have felt the same way because she tried to close the door. Marcus blocked it with his foot. "You're going to pay me, Julia, one way or another." That was when I decided Elle's advice could go to hell. I walked out of her house and across the street, my hands clenched into fists. Marcus saw me coming and straightened up, a smile spreading across his face. There he is, Marcus said. The man of the hour. How's it feel, Dan, knowing your wife needed a real man to satisfy her? I stopped about 5 feet away from him, close enough to see the sweat stains on his shirt and smell the lingering aroma of fish and desperation. Get off my property, Marcus. Your property? Funny, I've been spending so much time here lately. It feels like home. I said get off my property. Marcus stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his size and muscles. Make me. I'd been in the army for 6 years before I got into IT, and I'd learned a few things about dealing with bullies. The first rule was that most of them were cowards who folded the moment someone stood up to them. The second rule was that sometimes you had to call their bluff. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us until we were almost nose to nose. Marcus, I said quietly, you have exactly 10 seconds to get in your truck and drive away. If you're still here after that, I'm going to call the police and have you arrested for trespassing and harassment. You think I'm scared of you? I think you're scared of a lot of things, like bankruptcy and homelessness, and having to get a real job now that your gigolo career is over. Marcus's face flushed red. You destroyed my life. No, Marcus. You destroyed your own life. I just made sure everyone knew about it. For a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. His hands were clenched into fists, his jaw tight with rage. But then he seemed to deflate, the fight going out of him as he realized he had nothing left to lose and nothing to gain. This isn't over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is. Marcus looked at Julia, who was standing in our doorway with her arms wrapped around herself. You'll regret this, he told her. Both of you. Then he walked back to his truck and drove away, leaving the smell of fish and failure hanging in the humid air. Julia and I stood in our driveway, not looking at each other. Thank you, she said finally. Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you. I walked back to Elle's house, leaving Julia alone with the wreckage of her choices. The 4th of July block party had been a neighborhood tradition for 15 years, a sprawling celebration that took over the entire street with barbecue grills, folding tables, and enough alcohol to float a small boat. This year, it was going to be special for entirely different reasons. I'd been planning this moment for 2 weeks, ever since Marcus's pathetic attempt at intimidation had convinced me that public humiliation wasn't enough. Some people needed a more comprehensive education in consequences. You're sure about this? Ella asked, helping me load equipment into her car. Because once you do this, there's no taking it back. I'm sure. The equipment in question was a portable projector and screen that I'd borrowed from my office, along with a laptop loaded with everything I'd collected on Marcus Bell over the past month. Photos, emails, financial records, customer testimonials, and the crown jewel of my collection, a video compilation set to music that told the complete story of Marcus's con game. What about Julia? Ella asked. I'd been thinking about Julia a lot lately. She'd been trying to reconcile with me for the past week, bringing me coffee in the morning, cooking my favorite meals, even suggesting we take a vacation together to work things out. But every gesture felt hollow, motivated more by fear of divorce than genuine remorse. Julia made her choice, I said. Now she gets to live with the consequences. The block party started at 4 o'clock, with neighbors setting up tables and grills along the length of Maple Street. The Hendersons brought their famous potato salad, the Johnsons contributed a cooler full of beer, and the Pattersons set up a bounce house for the kids. Julia had volunteered to help with decorations, probably hoping to rehabilitate her image after the Marcus scandal. I watched her hanging red, white, and blue streamers with forced enthusiasm, chatting brightly with neighbors who responded with polite but distant smiles. The neighborhood's attitude toward Julia had shifted dramatically since the video of Marcus's humiliation had gone viral. She was no longer the successful real estate agent who threw great dinner parties. She was the woman who'd been duped by a con man, the wife who'd cheated on her husband with a handyman who charged premium rates for his services. She looks miserable, Elle observed, following my gaze. Good. At 6 o'clock, as the sun started to sink toward the horizon and the beer began to flow more freely, I made my move. The projector screen went up quickly, positioned so that everyone at the party could see it clearly. The projector itself was hidden behind the Henderson's SUV, connected to my laptop via a long cable. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, tapping a fork against my beer bottle to get everyone's attention, "if I could have your attention for just a moment." The crowd turned toward me with the lazy interest of people who'd been drinking in the Florida heat for 2 hours. Julia looked up from the dessert table, her face already showing concern. "I know we usually save the speeches for later," I continued, "but I wanted to share something with all of you while we're all together. A little neighborhood education, you might say." I clicked the remote, and the screen lit up with the title slide of my presentation. The Marcus Bell Story, a case study in modern romance. The crowd's attention sharpened immediately. Several people pulled out their phones, sensing that something interesting was about to happen. "As many of you know," I said, "my wife Julia recently hired a local handyman named Marcus Bell to do some work around our house. What started as a simple garbage disposal repair turned into something much more comprehensive." The first slide showed Marcus's business card and website, looking professional and legitimate. The second slide showed his inflated price list, with comparisons to what other contractors charged for similar work. "Marcus had an interesting business model," I continued. "He didn't just fix your plumbing. He provided what he called premium personal service to his female customers." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Julia had gone pale, her hands gripping the edge of the dessert table. "Let me show you what I mean." The next slides were a carefully edited selection of photos I'd taken through Elle's kitchen window. Julia and Marcus on our deck, in our hot tub, disappearing into our house together. Nothing explicitly pornographic, but the intimacy was unmistakable. The crowd's reaction was immediate and electric. Gasps, whispers, and a few poorly suppressed snickers as people realized they were watching their neighbor's marriage implode in real time. "But Julia wasn't Marcus's only customer," I said, advancing to the next slide. "In fact, she was part of a much larger operation." The screen now showed a map of our neighborhood with red pins marking the houses where Marcus had worked. There were 12 pins in total, scattered across a 6-block area. "Marcus was very thorough in his customer outreach," I said. "Mrs. Patterson on Oak Street, Mrs. Rodriguez on Pine Avenue, the divorced woman on Maple Street, all of them received Marcus's special attention. All of them paid premium rates for the privilege." I could see Mrs. Patterson in the crowd, her face bright red with embarrassment and anger. Several other women were looking uncomfortable, probably wondering if their own interactions with Marcus would be part of the presentation. Now, you might be wondering how Marcus managed to juggle so many customers at once. The answer is simple. He was very organized. The next slide showed screenshots of Marcus's email system with customer names, appointment schedules, and billing records. I'd redacted the most explicit content, but there was enough detail to make it clear what kind of services Marcus was really providing. As you can see, Marcus kept detailed records of his customer interactions. Appointment times, service preferences, payment schedules. He ran his operation like a business, because that's exactly what it was. The crowd was completely silent now, transfixed by the scope of Marcus's deception. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing the adult tension in the air. "But every business has overhead," I continued, and Marcus's overhead was considerable. Truck payments, apartment rent, maintaining his image as a successful contractor. It all added up. The financial records on screen showed Marcus's precarious situation. Credit cards maxed out, bills past due, living paycheck to paycheck, despite charging premium rates for his services. "Which brings us to the end of our story," I said, clicking to the final slide. The screen now showed a video compilation set to upbeat music. Marcus's truck being towed, his apartment being emptied by bailiffs, his business website displaying an account suspended message. The finale was the security camera footage from the car wash, showing Marcus desperately trying to remove the smell of rotting seafood from his truck, while employees in hazmat suits used industrial cleaning equipment. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Several people were recording the presentation on their phones, probably already planning to share it on social media. So let this be a lesson to all of us, I concluded, raising my beer bottle in a mock toast. When someone offers you premium personal service at premium prices, make sure you know exactly what you're paying for. The applause was thunderous. People were clapping, cheering, and calling out comments about Marcus's comeuppance. Several neighbors approached me to shake my hand and congratulate me on my presentation. "That was brilliant," said Mr. Henderson. "About time someone exposed that creep," added Mrs. Johnson. "You should send this to the Better Business Bureau," suggested another neighbor. Through it all, Julia stood frozen by the dessert table, her face a mask of humiliation and rage. When the crowd finally began to disperse, she walked over to me with murder in her eyes. "How could you do this to me?" she hissed, keeping her voice low so the remaining neighbors wouldn't hear. "Do what? Tell the truth?" "You destroyed me, Dan. You destroyed my reputation, my friendships, my business relationships, everything." "I didn't destroy anything, Julia. I just made sure everyone knew what you'd been doing with their money." "Their money?" "The referrals you gave Marcus, the recommendations, the introductions to other potential customers. You were his partner, whether you realized it or not." Julia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "I didn't know what he was doing." "Maybe not at first, but you knew he was overcharging people, and you knew he was sleeping with other customers, and you didn't care as long as you were getting your share of his attention. That's not true, isn't it? Julia, you spent $3,000 of our money on a con man who was using you to scam our neighbors. You were either his partner or his victim, and either way, you're not the person I married." Julia looked around the party, at neighbors who were still talking about the presentation, still laughing about Marcus's downfall. Her humiliation was complete and public, exactly as I'd intended. "I'll never forgive you for this," she said. "Good. That makes two of us." As if summoned by the drama, Marcus Bell's blue Ford pickup truck appeared at the end of the street. The crowd noticed immediately, conversation stopping as people turned to watch the man they'd just been laughing about. Marcus parked at the curb and got out, his face grim with determination. He'd cleaned up since our last encounter. Fresh clothes, newly washed hair, an attempt at dignity. But the lingering smell of fish sauce followed him like a personal cloud, and his truck still bore the stains of our previous confrontation. "Well, well," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Look who's back for an encore." Marcus walked toward us with the swagger of a man who thought he still had some power left. The crowd parted to let him through, but their expressions ranged from amused to hostile. "Dan," Marcus said, stopping about 10 feet away from me, "we need to talk. I think we've said everything we need to say. You destroyed my life over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I gestured toward the projection screen, which still displayed the final slide of my presentation. "Marcus, I have your emails, your financial records, your customer list. There's no misunderstanding here. You hacked my accounts. You stole private information. Your password was Hammer123. That's not hacking, that's basic literacy." The crowd laughed, and Marcus's face flushed red. He was losing control of the situation, and everyone could see it. "You owe me money," he said, his voice getting louder. "All of you owe me money for work I did in good faith." "Good faith?" Mrs. Patterson stepped forward from the crowd. "You charged me $4,000 to retile my bathroom and spent half the time trying to get me into bed. And you charged me $6,000 for a deck that any competent contractor could have built for half that," added the woman from Maple Street. More voices joined in, a chorus of Marcus's former victims recounting their experiences with his premium personal service. The man who'd seemed so confident and charismatic just a month ago was now surrounded by angry customers demanding refunds for services they'd never really wanted. "This is harassment," Marcus said, backing toward his truck. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said. "I'm sure they'd love to hear about your business practices." Marcus looked around the crowd, searching for a friendly face and finding none. Even Julia had stepped away from him, unwilling to be associated with his humiliation. "This isn't over," he said, the same empty threat he'd made before. "Yes, it is." Marcus climbed into his truck and drove away for the last time, leaving behind only the lingering smell of fish sauce and failure. The crowd cheered his departure, then gradually returned to their barbecue and beer. Julia and I stood alone in the middle of the street, surrounded by the debris of our marriage. "I'm filing for divorce," she said quietly. "I already did." She looked surprised. "When?" "2 weeks ago. You'll be served tomorrow." Julia nodded, as if she'd expected this. "I suppose I deserve that." "Yeah, you do." She walked away without another word, leaving me standing in the street with Elle at my side and the satisfied knowledge that justice had been served. The fireworks started at 9 o'clock, bursting across the sky in brilliant displays of red, white, and blue. I watched them from my front porch with a cold beer in my hand and the warm satisfaction of a job well done. Marcus Bell was finished, his business destroyed, his reputation in ruins, his con game exposed for everyone to see. Julia was facing the consequences of her choices, her marriage over, and her standing in the community permanently damaged. And me? I was free. Free from a cheating wife, free from a marriage that had been slowly suffocating me, free from being the kind of man who let other people walk all over him. The final firework exploded overhead in a cascade of golden sparks that illuminated the entire neighborhood. In that moment of brilliant light, I could see my neighbors cleaning up from the party, my house standing empty and quiet, and my future stretching out ahead of me like an open road. Sometimes the only thing you can fix is revenge, and sometimes revenge fixes everything.